well. So here's the session for today, and I'm not going to speak a lot about it. So Nikki's already here. She's going to talk about the writing skills and stuff. So I'll hand it over to you, Nikki. Now I'll stop sharing my screen and I'll let you take over.
All right, great. Well, first, I just wanted to say thank you so much for having me today, and hopefully, I can provide some great advice. I wanted to take a couple different angles, and we had sort of talked about this, starting with sort of CFP writing and some presentation type skills, and then also talking a little bit about research, as well as what you sort of want to do with social media, LinkedIn, reaching out to mentors. So, we're going to try to cover a lot in a short amount of time. So, with that, let me go ahead and share.
Yes, just give me one. Okay, are you able to share? Okay, great. Perfect.
Yes. And then, great. Can you see the slideshow okay?
Yes,
Perfect.
perfect.
Yes. Great. Thank you. All right. So, for anyone I haven't met, my name is Nikki Robinson. I am a security architect at IBM. I'm also an adjunct professor at Capital Technology University, where I received both of my doctoral degrees. So I started with a DSC in cybersecurity, mostly because I was really interested in cybersecurity, but I had a master's degree and I knew that I really wanted to carry on with research, which I'll have some tips and tricks about that as well. Sort of being a practitioner and what does research mean as a practitioner. And then followed that up with a PhD in human factors last year. I had an idea for a lot of my research is based in vulnerability chaining, which is really why I got interested in research in the first place. I felt like there wasn't enough out there in the academic community around vulnerability chaining and vulnerability chaining concepts. So I sort of took that with my DSC. And then on the PhD, I took this idea of vulnerability chaining blindness, this way that we only look at vulnerabilities one at a time instead of in combination, which makes it really difficult to remediate them. So that's what I did with the PhD. I'm also a co host with Chris Hughes on the Resilient Cyber podcast. We do that every Friday on LinkedIn Live. For anyone who has ever thought about starting a podcast, just do it. It is so much fun. It's been a blast. So I highly recommend if you've ever wanted to or you've been thinking about it, just go for it because it was one of the favorite things I get to do. And then to bring this back to sort of CFP writing into public speaking. So when I started, even before I started with the DSC, I was basically a Citrix engineer. I managed a large Citrix infrastructure environment and had the opportunity to go to a Citrix conference and speak. It was a Citrix mobility conference in DC in like 2015. And I had the opportunity to go and speak about what Citrix meant for mobile development in the government space. And I remember being so nervous because I was asked to come and speak on a panel. And I wasn't sure what that was going to look like because I didn't have to write for that, but I had this speaking opportunity. So I went and did that. And I really enjoyed it. So I was like, okay, well, I'm going to take this, especially once I started the DSC. And I said, okay, I'm going to start writing proposals, writing for the CFPs for different conferences. And I very ambitiously started with Black Hat and DEF CON and writing CFPs for them and rejected immediately. But I learned so much through that process. I didn't have enough detail. I wasn't quite writing for the right things. And I learned so much through that process that I started getting better at writing and researching and making sure that I was writing to the themes, making sure that I was hitting the points that they were asking me to. And that totally changed the way that I not only wrote, but then started getting accepted to conferences and then building up confidence and then moving from there. So I wanted to share that story because I get rejected from conferences all the time, still happens all the time. And it can happen for a lot of reasons. So if you in the past have submitted things or been rejected either from conferences or your talk's not accepted for some reason, there are a lot of reasons talks cannot get accepted. It might be a perfect proposal and it might be rejected because they had too many great proposals. Maybe they had another proposal that was somewhat similar to yours and maybe they knew the author or maybe they had seen some presentation that they had done before and said, oh, okay, I know I can, I've seen them speak before, I'll have them come speak. So it can be a little hard to get started, but once you start getting those acceptances and you start getting a library of presentations that you've done, people start to know, oh, okay, I can talk to them, though I know that I can, sort of reach out to them. So I wanted to provide some of those tips and tricks that I've learned along the way. But when it comes to getting that, I'm sorry you weren't accepted to the conference. It's okay. It happens to all of us. And there's lots of reasons for that. So don't feel afraid of, being rejected or not getting accepted to conferences. And I think having that confidence, building up that confidence, because when you start writing for these CFPs, each one's going to be a little different. They're all going to be looking for different things. And it depends on what kind of session you want to go with. If it's a bird of a feather session, it might be a 10-minute, 5-minute presentation that you would be doing. And so you'd have to be really concise. You'd have to hit maybe 3 to 5 bullet points, and that would be it. That's all that they're looking for. If you were doing a longer talk, like a 30-minute or a 45-minute presentation, they would expect probably a much larger submission. They'd want to have an abstract. You'd want to have an entire outline for, minute 1, introduction, minutes 2 to 5, what you'll be covering, agenda and problem statement, things like that. So you have to be somewhat detailed in what you're doing, but you really have to speak to what they're asking for. So depending on the type of presentation, you have to be really, really careful about what they're looking for. Because what I found, I got from DEF CON, when I got that rejection notice, they offer, which is fantastic, always take them up on the offer. They offered to provide the feedback from the review committee. And I said, yes, please, I would love to see that. And a lot of the feedback I got was, this is a great topic. I don't have enough information to make a decision one way or the other if this is going to fit into this or not. And that was really the feedback I got was, great topic. Sounds interesting. Need more information. So I learned that really give them as much information as you can up front. That's really their first view into what you're offering, what you're bringing to the table. And a separate pro tip here, I didn't include on the slide, but a separate pro tip, if there's ever a box that's like comments, additional notes, additional comments, or comments to the review committee, always add comments. Always say, if there isn't a box for this, hey, I have experience doing this, or, this is going to be my first speaking engagement. I really want to speak at this conference. I'm excited to do this. Give them information about you, because it really humanizes the proposal. It doesn't make it this very static, presentation. It gives them a lot more information on who you are and what you'd like to speak about. I highly suggest starting with smaller conferences like B-Sides. I love B-Sides. They have been a phenomenal place. After sort of that Citrix Mobility Conference, it had been several years since I had another speaking engagement. And B-Sides Nova was actually the first one that I spoke at, of course, right before the pandemic. February, I think it was like February 2020, and then the world shut down in March. But B-Sides Nova was the first one that I started with, and I had such a fantastic experience. I had reached out to people before when I saw that, which is another tip when we'll get to sort of the mentor section and the LinkedIn section. But I had reached out to, I don't know if you all know John Stoner. He also speaks at a lot of conferences. He's big on LinkedIn. He is also a really great ally for women who are interested in STEM, in cybersecurity, and getting into the field. He's been a fantastic ally. So I had reached out to him because I saw he was speaking at B-Sides Nova and said, hey, I see that you speak a lot at conferences. I was curious if you could review my presentation, sort of help me out. John and I have been friends ever since. He was a fantastic contact. He has put me in contact with other women in the industry. So I've met other women in the industry because of him. So I'm skipping ahead a little bit, but making those LinkedIn connections for CFPs can be super beneficial, because he was able to sort of review my presentation and give live feedback, which was fantastic. So let me see here. The one last thing I wanted to sort of cover before I move on to the next slide. There are, like B-Sides, and even I think some of the other big conferences too, but a lot of the smaller conferences have new speaker tracks. They will either pair you with a mentor or provide you the opportunity to work with someone on your presentation, or recommend somebody to work with if you don't have a co-author. I always say, if you can find someone like a John Stoner or someone else in the industry who might be offer some of their time, consider a co-author. Consider someone who might want to write with you. I know Megan Jacot, she's done a lot with co-authors, a lot with writing and working with other people. And it's been a great thing. And it's been a great thing for me too, to work with other people. Dr. Philip Culp, who I worked with, he actually, we did the DSC together, but him and I've worked on a ton of research together. And having a co-author, somebody to work with you and help you sort of identify, maybe, hey, you're using this word too much. I get that feedback a lot. Hey, you're using this word too much. Hey, try something else. They can really help you sort of build up that presentation. And it's the same with CFPs. Before you submit your CFP, have your mentor, have someone you know that's a public speaker, review it. Because for your CFPs, you should always have them in a separate Word document. I always say that because I feel like 9 times out of 10, I go to submit something, and if it takes me too long, it kicks me out, and then everything's gone. All my text is gone. So always keep something in an extra Word document. Let me go ahead and move on to I have a folder for all of the CFPs I've ever submitted, whether they were accepted or rejected. There's a lot of times that I submitted to one conference and maybe the topic wasn't quite right. And I've gotten this in research too, that the topic wasn't quite right for that particular volume or that particular type of journal, but there may be another one out there that's more applicable. So keep your work. You may be able to tailor it, edit it, update it, maybe based on feedback from those CFPs, and submit to another conference. So don't scrap it. Keep it, because depending on what the topic is, you can probably resubmit. Checking your grammar. I can't say this enough, because I've been in, written for CFPs. I've also been a reviewer and I've done panels and things like that. Check your grammar, check your grammar, check your grammar. It is so important, because if someone is reading your proposal, you have to think about it how the reviewer is reading it. Have you provided them enough information? Are they able to understand clearly what you're saying? And is the spelling and grammar correct? Because if it's not, they're going to start to see issues and say, I don't know if, presentation, that it'll just have them start looking for other things. So if you can make sure your grammar and spelling is 100% perfect, it will help ensure that they're going to give your proposal the best review possible. And that's really what you're going for, is how can I make sure that they're spending the most time on my proposal? Again, having a mentor review your work, and it doesn't even have to be a mentor. It could be someone in the community, and say, hey, I've got a submission. I did this for RSA, and I wanted to share just a quick story about RSA. I have been rejected from RSA for 5 years running. Every year, I do my submission. I've changed it every year. I've reworked it. I've filled it. I've done everything I can, and it gets rejected every year. And I went and I talked to Dr. Margaret Cunningham. She was a cognitive psychologist, and now she's in cybersecurity. I think she works for Robinhood now as like a security analyst or a security researcher. And she's spoken at RSA a few years running. And so I went to her and said, this is what I submitted. I thought I hit everything, but I'd love your feedback and make sure that I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. She was so kind. She checked it out, looked at it, offered some suggestions, and then I'll be maybe submitting again for RSA next year. But what I want to bring out of that story is that, yes, I got rejected from RSA, but I made a new connection. Dr. Cunningham is fantastic. She's always been there to offer advice on different things. And we've got the chance to meet a few times, and she's fantastic. So I made a new connection. I got some great feedback and was able to rework what I had. And maybe I'll submit it again next year. Maybe I'll submit it somewhere else. But I got some great feedback from someone who's spoken at RSA for a few years. So to me, it wasn't really a negative thing. It turned into a really positive thing. So if you can take that potentially negative or situation, or could feel, sort of bad about it, and shift it into a positive, it can really positively impact then your CFPs going forward. The other comment I wanted to make, if you are just sort of getting your feet wet, submitting things, maybe you haven't gotten accepted yet, going to some of these conferences and volunteering for sessions, volunteer to run the sessions, because you're going to learn a few things. You're going to learn about how the conferences work. You're going to meet probably the conference organizers. You will probably meet them at least at some of the like B-sides and stuff like that. You'll meet them in passing. You'll make new network connections, but you'll also get to see the presentations. You can see the types of presentations that were accepted, talk to the people who presented, get some tips and tricks from them. So it's just a massive benefit all around. You can really take those connections and bring them forward to the next conference, because at B-Sides Nova, maybe last year, you volunteered, you met people, you were able to sort of get a better idea of what types of proposals were accepted, and take that and use all of that for next year. Reach out to your connections and say, I'm submitting a CFP this year. I really want to speak this year. I'm a new speaker. And most of those connections will say, that's fantastic. I'm going to talk to the organizer and tell them to watch out for your proposal. Tell them that your proposal is coming because you volunteered last year. And that's another great note to add in any of your comment sections that you have. I volunteered at this conference last year. I had a great time. I'd really love to speak this year. Bam, they know who you are. It helps give them a better idea of the fact that you're interested, not just in speaking at any conference, but speaking at their conference. And that's a big deal. The other thing I wanted to, before I get off of writing CFP recommendations, think about your title. You really only have, and for some of these conferences, you only have an abstract and a title to catch the reviewer. Think about what your title means to your presentation. Is it catchy? A lot of the great CFP titles that I've seen and used are based on movie titles or famous movie quotes or song titles, things like that, that you can tailor and twist into what you're doing. So I wrote a book called Mind the Tech Gap. And when I was thinking about the title, I was like, I need to pick something that speaks to the content, is sort of catchy, will be helpful for technical people, whether IT or security. So mind the tech gap. People know that phrase, mind the gap. That's something that comes to mind for people. So putting in mind the tech gap would be like, mind the tech gap. What does that mean? Boom, they want to read the book. So get people interested, have them asking that question. What does that mean? What does that interesting thing mean? John Stoner had a presentation titled, I can't remember the exact title, but it was something about like, how is incident response like playing soccer or like playing a soccer game or something like that. And it was kind of like, how can I put those two? I don't really understand. I want to see what he's talking about. What does that mean? Because I used to play soccer. And so think about that. How can you twist titles to make them really interesting and catchy? For research, I'm going to pivot a little bit to research, because writing research is wildly different than writing CFPs. I do highly recommend, if you're interested in writing research, you can absolutely do it on your own. I have done research on my own. But if you know a professor, if you know someone from the school that you went to, if you have friends who are students at a school, and you know maybe one of their professors or can get in touch with one of their professors, it helps a lot to have someone who is already established in the industry or has written research before to help you through the first time, because getting research published is a massive process. So think about sort of why you want to do the research. Your problem and purpose statements are absolutely the most important thing that you're going to be looking at. So think about who you want to help. Why do you want to help them? What is your scope going to be? Who's your population going to be? Who are you interested in talking to or conducting some sort of study with? And really have a mentor guide you through this process the first time. I can't say, so I have 5 published articles now. It has been a challenge in each time, because they've all been with different journals. each journal is looking for something different. So IEEE versus ACM or FTC, which is the Future Technology Conference, they're looking for different things. Like a research conference is looking for very different things than a technical conference is. And they want a paper, a 15 to 20 page paper. Typically, they may end up cutting it or making it shorter for the volume, but it would be more of a 15 to 20 page paper if you're going to go that route. Now, I'll also say there are a ton of conferences that also want presentations. Like they'll want just a presentation and not a full paper. Or you can do like posters. Like even the Women in Cyber conference did this, where they had like posters and you could present your research in that format. There are a ton of conferences like IEEE and ACM that do exactly the same thing, that you can put your research out there without it having to be, a 20-page paper. You can do these big boards and present your research at the conference. So there's a lot of different ways that you can get into the research community. I would suggest considering if you were really interested in IEEE and publishing in IEEE, consider a membership. Consider reaching out to members of IEEE. Get someone from IEEE to write a paper with you, like work with them, because most of the time, I can totally say this as a researcher, it is really hard to write a paper on your own. And so when people reach out and say, hey, I want to write something with you, it's like, oh my gosh, that'd be great. Because it's so hard to do it all on your own, and having people that want to help is fantastic. So again, reaching out to people can be the best way to start getting published until you want to, sort of go out on your own. And then submissions can take 6 months to a year just for the review process. It's a lot longer than a CFP process for a technical conference. So typically if you're submitting to a research organization, it's going to be, they want you to submit to them and them only until they're done with the review process. Once they're done with the review process, then they'll come back and say, you know what, this doesn't just quite fit our paper. You feel free to submit anywhere else. But most of the research journals will only want you to submit to them. So you have to wait 6 months. And then if you receive that notice, then you can submit somewhere else. So it's a lengthy process to get published. I am actually still working on, so I got my PhD in December of last year. I'm still working on getting my dissertation published as a research paper for a conference, because I've had 2 separate journals say, this isn't quite right. And part of that is because the area that I'm in is super niche, and it is difficult to find a research area that fits sort of what I'm doing, because it's sort of cybersecurity, it's sort of human factors. There aren't a lot of security human factors journals out there, so I'm trying to find the right one. But persistence is really key. That's why I say try and try again. Persistence is really, really key. You just have to keep trying until you find the right fit. And again, don't be afraid to reach out to people and ask for help, because if you're, you're not really quite sure where you're going to go or what you're going to do or sort of how it's going, ask for advice. There are a lot of professors out there at different universities that will say, hey, yeah, try this journal first. Like this journal is the one that you really need to go to first. So yeah, so don't be afraid to reach out and ask for help. And then I'm going to give a few short speaking recommendations and then move into the social media aspect. Especially when you're just starting out with speaking, I say really practice, and not just practice alone, practice in front of your friends, your colleagues. Ask your manager, hey, can I do a lunch and learn at work and present this at work? I've done that a lot. I've found that if I go to my manager and say, hey, I'm presenting on chaos security engineering, I want to test it out with the group. Is that okay? Most of the time he's like, yeah, absolutely. We all want this information and we're getting it, for free. Yeah, do it. Yeah. So that's a great way to get some experience and show off some of your skills to your team too. That's pretty cool too. You get the ability to present to your team, as well as get some practice in. And some of the best practice is getting questions from those people, because that can help you tighten up the presentation, or maybe add a slide and say, oh, I hadn't thought about that. I'll add a slide here and discuss this in the presentation. So they can give really good feedback too. Make sure you're telling a story. I will say this is not the best slide deck I've ever put together. I would say use pictures, use graphics, use videos. Don't be afraid to do something a little different than just having text on your slides. Do something a little different. It grabs the audience. I go back to John Stoner a lot because he really gives the best presentations. I would sit anytime I would sit in a presentation with him. He will use videos and
I'll talk to you later. You in a class?
No, I'm not in a.
He will use. Oh, that's okay.
So sorry. Yeah, there was someone who was not on mute. So sorry about that. But yeah.
Oh, no worries. Yeah, no worries. So there are a lot of the presentations that John gives, he'll use like GIFs or memes or parts of video or parts of movies, like to describe what he's talking about and bring it back to, you know, whatever cybersecurity angle that he's taking. And I love that because when you're looking up at the slides, you get to sort of see like this funny bit from a movie, or he'll let it play and then talk to you about what does that mean to cybersecurity or digital forensics or analysis. And it keeps the audience engaged. So think about, how can you engage your audience? Is it by putting up a picture and speaking for a few minutes? Is it by giving them a little bit of text and then providing the story behind that text? That's kind of how I like to do it, is to put up a couple of quick tips and then I speak and provide stories and, you know, sort of actual examples of how the items that are on the slides work in the real world. You know, not just practice makes perfect, but how do you make that practice perfect? By talking to your mentors, by testing it out at work, by, you know, all these things. So that's how I like to present, giving sort of stories and examples on what I'm talking about on the slides. But there are so many different ways. So don't feel like you have to be beholden to any one way of presenting. Each person has their own unique style. And I think that's what's fantastic. Embrace your unique style, whatever that may be. I had her name's Kate. I can't remember but she does a lot of speaking. She does a lot of CTFs and things like that, but she also does a lot of presentations on CTFs. And one of the things she does, this is the best tip I've ever heard, and I've started using it. If she's giving a presentation in person, she asks everyone if they can hear her to raise their hand, like just to make sure that she's projecting her voice. And so everybody will raise their hand and she's like, great, you can all raise your hand. That means you all can participate. So when I ask a question, you're all going to respond. So she keeps them engaged. You know, she gets them laughing first, and then it's you create that engagement with the audience, and it becomes more dynamic. It doesn't become this, you know, static person standing behind a podium. It becomes more dynamic, which is one of the things I like to do. I like the idea of practicing, but I like the idea of not being static, you know, not having a script that I follow, because that feels very impersonal. So being able to just talk to the audience and ask them questions. And I personally like to be interrupted. I tell people usually at the beginning of my presentations, like, just interrupt me. It's fine. Tell me, ask me the question. Let's go. Because I think that is dynamic. That allows people to be engaged with you, and you're not just talking at them, you're talking with them. So just a few tips there. And then I'm going to sort of wrap it up on this networking social media angle. When it comes to reaching out to people on LinkedIn, the best piece of advice I'm going to start with: offer something to someone. Don't just reach out to someone and say, hey, I have questions. I need answers. When you do that, it starts a very different conversation than when you reach out to someone and say, hey, I saw you speak at this conference. You know, would you like someone to review your slides next time? Or would you mind, would you have time for coffee, or would you have time to get together or something like that? But trying to offer someone something, or offer an exchange of something, instead of saying, hey, I really need something right now, and I need your help. Sometimes people are still willing to offer help and get engaged, but it can be You can make a longer standing connection if you can reach out to someone and offer them something, or try to, like when I reached out to John, it was like, hey, do you still need volunteers for this conference coming up? I saw that maybe they were, but I'm not sure. Just wanted to reach out to you. I know you've been volunteering there. Just wanted to see. Yeah, they always need volunteers. That'd be great. Done. Connection made, offer made. And now when I want to ask for something, it's like, oh, hey, remember that time? Yeah. Oh yeah. You helped me with that thing. Yeah. What do you need? How can I help you? So and then you build a relationship with someone, you build a connection with someone, instead of it just being, hi, and that's it. So think about when you're making a connection with someone, why are you making that connection? Do you think they'd be a great mentor for you? Do you want to maybe talk to them first and see sort of do they have time? Are they available? How many mentees maybe do they already have? And sort of get an idea about who the person is that you're reaching out to before you just sort of send that connection request. And when you send a connection request, always send a message. It's always great to connect with someone and send them a message and say, hey, I saw you speak at this last conference. I thought you did a fantastic job. Just wanted to say hello and looking forward to learning more from you. Boom, done. That could be it. It's just, hey, I really appreciated it. Great seeing you talk. When you're posting on LinkedIn, as far as, looking at it from a content creator perspective, because you sort of have to think about when you're doing CFPs, when you're writing research, when you're doing social media, you are a content creator. So you're not consuming content as much. You need to create content. That means you can share articles, but if you're going to share articles or you're going to share things, have an opinion about it. Say something about it. Don't just say, or don't just post an article with no text. Post an article and say, there was this really interesting article about vulnerability management and how it applies to software supply chain security, but I think we might be missing this piece, or I think SBOMs may still be too complicated. I think we need to flesh this out a little bit more before before organizations can really implement them. So give it a little bit of an opinion. I think one of the biggest things, people talk about building your brand and making yourself a brand, but I think when we're talking about that, we're really saying, tell people who you are, tell people what your opinion is, because then they're going to start to listen and they're going to be interested in what your opinion is. Chris Hughes is a great example of that on LinkedIn. He will not only share articles, the articles that he shares are phenomenal, but when he shares them, he provides usually 3 to 4 paragraphs of how he feels about it. What does this mean to the industry? What does it mean to him as a co-founder and a CISO? What does it mean to the government? What does it mean to private industry? So he'll give that feedback before as he posts the article, so that you get a really good idea of who he is, how he feels about things, and you know who he is. It's not an impersonal thing, someone who just posts articles, but you're posting articles with meaning. So I highly suggest doing that. On the topic of just reaching out to people and starting a conversation, I have a really great example that I reached out to Ron Ross of NIST, who wrote the SP 853 series, and many others. I think the 800 161 or several other NIST documents. I'm a big fan of his. I tried really hard not to fangirl. I did it anyway, but I reached out to him on LinkedIn and just said, I just really appreciate what you're doing for the community. I saw the updated version of the NIST 853 R5. I saw the 800 161. I really liked them for these reasons. Thank you so much for all that you do for the community. And he reached back out to me and was like, yeah, I'm so glad you enjoyed it. Thanks so much. And then a few months later, I told Chris, I was like, I think I'm going to reach out to Ron and see if we can get him on the podcast. So I reached back out to him and said, hey, I do a podcast. I understand if you're too busy or you can't do it, but just thought I would ask if you'd be interested in doing it. Gave him the information about the podcast. He was like, yeah, when can we do it? And got Ron Ross on the podcast. So I got to meet one of my idols in the security industry because I reached out to him. So don't be afraid to reach out to people, but if you're going to reach out to them, have a message. Reach out to them with a message, and building up that connection. I've had other connections with other people that I've made that have led to speaking engagements, to speaking at conferences, to, flying out and going to a conference. I went to a conference in Portland recently because I reached out to someone on LinkedIn and they said, "Hey, have you seen our conference? You need to submit a CFP for this. Why haven't you submitted a CFP for this, or submitted a proposal for this?" I was like, "Oh, okay." So you never know what could come out of a connection. So I suggest reaching out to people, but reach out with a purpose. Don't just reach out to make 10,000 connections. You can do that, absolutely. But for me, it's really about actionable or building up connections that make sense. So for me, it's quality over quantity. Could I have 20,000 LinkedIn connections? Probably. But I make connections, and when I make those connections, I make them for a reason. Someone I'm mentoring, someone that reached out to me that needed help with something. Those are sort of the two paths of connections I get, are people that, hey, I have questions about Capital Technology University, or I'm interested in getting a PhD and answering questions about that, or reaching out to people maybe because I'm interested in a job. The job I got at IBM, I saw on LinkedIn. It was a posting on LinkedIn. And so I went out and applied for it and got the job. So you can absolutely use LinkedIn to get jobs, to make connections. You just have to use it really purposefully. So think about who you're reaching out to, why are you reaching out to them, and how can you help them? Can you offer them something in return for their time? Because a lot of people who are mentors, they don't have a lot of time. They are busy. They may have other mentees and things like that. So if you're reaching out to them, just make sure you reach out and try to offer something, or try to reach out with a purpose. And that was really it for the presentation. I wanted to leave plenty of time for questions, comments, if anybody's had any trouble with CFPs or writing, or had questions about research, happy to take them.
Thank you so much, Nikki. First of all, I just cannot thank you enough. I know some of the members have shown up, some of them joined, but they have to drop off. But I would like to really thank you. I don't have words to thank you enough for this amazing session, because it's not just about the information sharing you did, but the examples that you shared. For example, CFP rejections, how to reach out to people, and how that networking can really help you later on volunteer somewhere, speak somewhere, make some valuable connections. The information that you shared for Ron Ross, that's incredible. Not only connecting with him, I know I have been following his publications. So as soon as you start talking about it, I was like, wow. And getting him on podcast is you feel just next level. And it's just you can make things work. We just don't know how to make it, what language we should make. And coming back to your CFP thing, I have this question. So I also submitted for RSA this year, and my submission was selected as an alternate presentation. So they were waiting, if there is any extra space in that track, they can add us. And I actually waited till end of May, till RSA happened, and it couldn't happen. So do you have any suggestions, what happens in case of alternate presentations? Why are certain presentations or certain topics, they are selected as alternate, but they don't make it into the first place? Because this question in my mind, why not? The good news is, and I and there is one other person, we are still presenting for RSA webcast. But I still had that question, why couldn't we make it to the main conference? Do you have any ideas or any thought about this?
Yeah, so I've been selected as an alternate too for other conferences, and for the most part, I think they do it in case the speaker has to drop or the last minute, that they can have a presenter there. But I will say, for an alternate, it kind of stinks, because yes, I've done this before where I've had to go to a conference and then just not spoken. And it's that's kind of tough. I think they do it mostly because they need to make sure that they have content. And unfortunately, in that case, I don't know that they're always worried about the speaker. They're just sort of well, especially for something like RSA, they're well, we're giving them a potential opportunity, to speak at RSA. And so they think about it that way. They don't necessarily think about, man, this may be a major inconvenience for the speaker, to sort of be waiting for information back. So they really do it in case the speaker has to drop at the last minute. But I agree. It's sort of like, that's been a recent shift in the environment. I didn't have that a few years ago. They've really just in the last few year or so started doing that, where they have to have alternates, because otherwise they'll have like an hour slot and there's nobody there. So
yes. And my question was around like, okay, so it's literally goes in my mind, like either you reject it, okay, and either you keep something as alternate. So one of the thought which came to my mind was like, okay, if it was alternate, I thought it does, like the topic does make sense to them. It's just they couldn't shortlist it in among all the rest of the topics. That was my first thought. Like they found it good, maybe they have then kept it for alternate, but it's not good enough that that it would make it in the first like the first set of speakers. But the second thing which happened was like, I want to share it with everyone. Like though it was not selected, like later on, like they just mailed me like, no, we don't have any slots left. So they suggested me to reach out to RSA webcast that they run. And many times, like it was at the bottom of the email, like you can be considered for an RSA webcast. And I just read it and I thought about it like, okay, let me come back from RSA and then I might apply or reach out to them. And we did got shortlist for that, which was good. But at the same time, I was still thinking like, what went wrong? I also saw some of the topics which were similar to the one I actually submitted. So the topic that I submitted was on security operations and best practices, and that topic was also there, presented by certain speakers. It was a little bit tweaked, but yes, that topic was present. So I just felt like, okay, in case of alternate, you're at a very difficult position. You're not rejected and you're not accepted. That was very tough. And the second thing I had was like, I submitted a CFP in a conference, which is also very interesting. So I got rejected, but in the comments, it was nothing. And the only comment I had from one of the reviewers was, the topic is good. And I was like, what? Nothing else in the review. And it says like, the topic is good, it's interesting. And I don't see anything else. Like, have you also faced this kind of a situation?
There have been a lot of conferences that I get rejected from, and I have no idea why. I've asked for feedback. I still don't understand why. It's the same thing with research papers that I've submitted to journals, and I get no feedback. They're like, this just doesn't fit our journal. And I'm like, but your journal's called Human Factors Security Engineering. If my paper doesn't fit here, where does it fit? Like, I don't understand. So yes, that's definitely happened to me. I will say it's sort of a double-edged sword, right? Like you want feedback because you want to understand, but I actually got rejected from a conference very recently, like a week or two ago. And the feedback was really brutal, like really brutal. And I've been doing CFPs for, 2 years now, really pretty consistently. And I was shocked at this was for a birds of a feather session. And I got rejected saying I didn't have enough information in there. I had written like 3 or 4 paragraphs for a bird of a feather session. And I was like, you don't have enough information for a 5-minute presentation? This is 5 minutes. It took you 5 minutes to read it. Yeah. So exactly. Yeah. So absolutely. I have definitely experienced that. I think it really comes down to, like I said, because I've been on the review committee side for research papers and for conferences. And as a reviewer, as someone who's submitted a lot and seen a lot of really horrible feedback, I try to be somewhat positive, or at least provide like positive feedback, some sort of, positive criticism, instead of just, that wasn't good. That's not helpful. So yeah, I think it's really up to the review committee and who they had on the review committee. Unfortunately, you just sort of never know.
Yeah, you can control that part. So
yeah,
there was this conference where I got rejected as well. I reached out to them like, can I get feedback? I didn't get feedback, but there were conferences where I got the feedback as well. So that's very important. I let it open for everybody else. I know Nabila has a question. Shruti has also a hand raised. So yeah, go ahead. You can ask your questions.
Okay, so I'm going first. So I have this very basic question. Like, first of all, wonderful session. I mean, all of them are so important. Each and every point was so important. So my question is, like you mentioned that for the first time, if you're, willing to write a research paper, then you can connect with someone. Now, the thing is, I wanted to know some approach that I can make or I should be making to the people, because we have a lot of members with, different backgrounds, different domains. And yes, there are some members who are related to the domain I'm interested in. I'm currently into malware analysis. But the thing is, even if I happen to find a member who is into the similar domain, how much, like, is it possible, or is there any way how to understand if that person is also willing to put equal effort as much I will be willing to, put over there? Is there any way if I can understand the beginning itself?
No. The reason I say that is because I have worked with people before that seemed like they were into it. They wanted to help. They wanted to do it. And when it came down to actually doing it, they were no help. That's happened plenty of times. What I suggest in that scenario is that I've also had it both ways. I've had someone reach out to me and they want me to help with a paper, and then I haven't had time and they're like, okay, I'm submitting for both of us. And I'm like, oh, wait, I haven't looked at it. Wait, what are we doing? So I've had it both ways, but I think, you don't really know until you get started working with someone. I will say this is why, like Dr. Culp, I will work with him any day, because I know that he is consistent. I know I can, I know he'll respond to my messages. I know he'll do what he says he's going to do. So he's like one of the I have a small circle of people that I trust, but you don't know until you reach out and work with someone. So I always say, give somebody a chance, because you never know, especially if you have similar interests and you know that you are interested in doing similar things. But I don't know if I've ever been in a group like besides Dr. Culp where it's been 50-50 or even close to that. Usually it's like 80-20 or 60-40 or something like that. So I say you sort of can't, especially when it comes to like a mentor-mentee relationship, right? Like if this person is coming in and saying, I'm going to help you to organize this, you need to do the writing, but I will help you make sure it's perfect before you submit. You can't really expect them to do all of the work. You're going to have to put in some of that work, and then they'll help me to make sure that it gets accepted. But if you are working with someone sort of on the, you're both submitting your first one together. Yeah, you don't really know until you work with someone, but I always say, give everybody a chance until they prove you wrong. So
yeah, you're totally correct. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I can try my luck with that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure.
We have a question as well. Thank you, Shruti, for that. And thank you, Nikki, for answering that. I know that question and the answer is very tough. We have a question from Nabila, and she mentions that in a CFP, do we have to present a completely new concept, or a different perspective would just be fine? Like, do you really need to go with a very new concept, or if you can tweak and come up with a different perspective, is it fine?
It's going to be really dependent on the conference. And that's why understanding what their theme for the year is so important. And not just you can't just understand their theme. You have to understand like, what are the like the different areas of expertise that they're looking for, the different areas they're looking for. Because if you have a conference that's somewhat like, oh, emerging tech, that can mean 100 different things, but if they're saying, I want to understand the educational initiatives specifically around CTFs in colleges, something like that you probably want to bring sort of a different approach to that. You want to have a unique spin on that, because that's a pretty niche area. So you're going to want to have a unique spin on that. For big conferences, I will say they're looking for both. A lot of them are going to want sort of a couple different tracks. They're going to want like the stuff that's hot in the industry, which will be, like SBOM, Zero Trust, things like that. But they're also going to want things that are pretty unique or unique perspectives. So I typically try to do a little bit of both in mine. Like chaos engineering is a pretty big thing right now. Like if Netflix did it, a bunch of organizations are moving to that sort of like hypothetical based approach to development and testing. Chaos security engineering, there have been some presentations on it, but I haven't seen a lot in the industry. So I was like, that's an area I can add to, because I know enough about it. I understand security, chaos engineering, boom. And so I would say, really understand the conference, really understand the theme before you sort of decide which direction you want to go. But, sort of as you mentioned, there were a lot of security operations. If you pick a broad topic, there may be other people that also sort of submit in that area. So it's always good to have sort of a separate flair. But sometimes, again, sometimes that backfires. Like it's backfired on me before where they're like, this doesn't quite fit. So you never really know until you submit. But I say that's the best thing you can do is look at what their theme is for the year. But also a lot of conferences will have their past presentations up. Look at the titles of what was accepted. Look at like what they actually presented on. That'll give you an idea of what the conference organizers and the reviewers are looking for.
Great. I think it should have helped. Nabila? Yes, I see the message. It definitely helps, she mentions. Anyone else has any other question regarding CFP and research papers or submissions? Any challenge, any experience that you would like to share? Anyone?
I have another question. It's
sure.
Related to public speaking skills. Like it has been, this pandemic time have actually made a lot of us more introvert like me. So when you have to, actually perform in a stage in front of so many people in a big conference, then of course, there's a chance that you get some kind of anxiety, a little panic attack kind of things. And how do you deal with it at that point of time?
Yeah, I love this question because I did a lot of my presentations early on in the pandemic were virtual. I try to look at it as really positive for presenting. I always try to just put my mindset in there that I'm going to get immediate feedback. I'm going to see the faces of the people that I'm talking to. I see that as a really good thing because otherwise it's hard to tell if people are interested, if they're understand what you're talking about. But if you're looking at a crowd of people, like when I was presenting my vulnerability chaining blindness at WESIS, I was looking out at the crowd and I could tell that like the front row, especially, they were looking at me like, what is she saying? Like, what is she talking about? So to me, it's actually a really, really great thing. Like it's a really great thing. So think about it from that perspective that yes, there may be some anxiety, a little bit of nerves, but it's really exciting to get immediate feedback. And that helps you tailor your presentation. So you can be prepared to, like, if somebody is looking confused in the audience, you can explain that concept a little bit more. You can expand on what you're talking about a little bit more. And that makes your presentation even better. So I would say try to take that anxiety and use it as positive energy, like use it as dynamic energy when you're speaking. But yeah, I mean, I think there's always going to be nerves. I'm always a little nervous. But I think that also means that you care, you care about doing a good job. You care about doing that. So one final tip, don't look at them, look over their heads. So don't look in their eyes, just look right over their heads. And then you don't feel like you're staring at a bunch of people and they're staring at you. You're just sort of looking at the wall behind them, but they think you're looking at them. So that's a good tip. If you're feeling really nervous, just keep looking up. Yeah.
I did that. I did that. I have to confess, I did that. And it works. So as soon as you start to make eye contact, I think it's good. Sometimes it makes you more nervous. So that's a great tip. Actually, we have hit time. I'll stop the recording.